Hello, my name is Dr. Erin Gomez, and this is a brief overview of magnetic resonance and a basic MRI spin echo sequence. Let's talk about protons. We have protons in the fat, muscle, and sugars within our body, and of course, within water. Remember that a significant portion of our bodies consists of water, and that a hydrogen atom is just a proton, one positron and one electron, with a positive and a negative pole. Because of this, each of these protons is capable of acting like a bar magnet. Usually, the orientation of these protons is random, but they can be influenced by an external magnetic field. At the most basic level, an MRI scanner is a giant magnet and generates its own magnetic field, which we can call B0. When protons are placed within this magnetic field, they'll line up parallel or anti-parallel to the primary magnetic field, with a small majority aligning with the direction of the primary magnetic field, just going with the flow. This generates what is referred to as the net magnetization vector. We can imagine this net magnetization along the z-axis, the long axis or length, of the patient's body. In addition to aligning with the magnetic field produced by the MRI scanner, the protons in your body are also spinning along their axes like little tops or globes. This is called precession or nuclear spin. The speed or frequency of this axial spin depends on the strength of the applied magnetic field and can be expressed by the Larmor equation. Simply put, this equation states that the precession frequency of a particle is equal to the strength of the magnetic field applied and the gyromagnetic ratio, which is a constant that is unique to each specific nucleus or element. With the protons aligned with the main magnetic field, we can influence them using externally applied radio frequency or RF pulses.
Okay, there we go. So all of our cells, like when you're being targeted, are essentially being manipulated to be in superposition. And then that's why we're so sensitive to radio frequency pulses. So it's not the fact that there's a radio station somewhere pulsing one signal from one point. No, the people that are going through this, I theorize, are constantly essentially hooked up to transcranial stimulation and or an MRI done with long distance. So this is done with the satellites and the cell towers, creating this constant field which creates superposition deliberately. And then at that point in time, they're able to alter our mood states, make us sick, do anything with very discrete, at the speed of light, radio frequency pulses. And just like you see in this visual.
This happens, the protons are knocked down into an alternate plane and also precess together in phase. The angle depends on the strength and duration of the RF pulse. Knocking the protons down into another plane is a change in their longitudinal magnetization. Normally, the majority of protons are...
So it's all about resonance, and that's the same thing what whistleblower Justin Carter, aka Brian Coffin, said. He described it in a different way, though, where he theorizes it is just from one base station, but he didn't really go into detail about that. I'm going to just say that that's scientifically impossible. The thing that's much more likely is a grid of cell towers, a grid of satellites, and they're both connected to one another, which enables this field generation, which could, in theory, be that of a MRI machine or on the same level of it, to be able to put our protons into superposition where they're monitoring our body based on our protons. That's how we're showing up from space. That's how we're showing up on these radio frequency scanner systems. And at that point in time, they're able to see everything that you'd be able to see from an X-ray or an MRI, which is with different frequencies, you can see our vascular system. With different frequencies, you can see our bone mass. With different frequencies, you see our flesh. With different frequencies, you see the electrons in our brains firing. So that's literally exactly what's happening from every single level and layer. So I can guarantee scientifically that this is what's happening.
Going with the flow and following the direction of the external magnetic field, but with a little extra energy, which we can call excitation. Protons have the ability to go against the current and instead orient themselves in the opposite direction against that of the magnetic field. This is called anti-parallel. That's not all that happens. With some energy applied in the form of the RF pulse, the protons will also precess together in phase. We can think of this brief synchronization as the transverse magnetization of the protons.
And that's where the mind control comes into play here. So when they have everyone's brains in superposition from a satellite, and that's leaked government information that is definite. Okay, then at that point in time, they could alter specific mind states to make Manchurian candidates, to make people depressed, to make people suicidal, to make people exhausted. It's all possible because why? Because the human brain has been decoded. So to see exactly what neurological sequence and at what rate in a specific person's brain to cause this specific feeling, that's something that these programs know how to do. And here's proof of it, that it's really not that difficult. It's to the point where it's in syllabuses for neuroscientists, that they can look for the same neurological pattern and the same sort of mental health problem will exist there 9 out of 10 times.
To recap, we've put some energy into the system and temporarily convinced each of these protons to sit down and get it together. This doesn't last long, much as if you were knocked off of your feet or if I yelled at my wild little children as they ran haphazardly around their playroom. Recovery is imminent. They'll behave for a short time, but they'll soon return my energy back to me as the baseline state of disorder is restored.
And that also aligns with my theory of Havana syndrome being a constant attack, not just a one-time brain damage attack. I feel like in most instances, our protons, our body, our mind will recover from that. So I feel like it's more likely that there is a constant bombardment of electrons happening to targeted people or those with Havana syndrome. It's much more likely.
Much like my children, the protons will recover or return to their original state of orientation with the magnetic field and asynchronous precession. Now that we've gone over what can happen when we administer an RF pulse, let's talk specifically about what happens during a typical spin echo sequence. Remember, the flip angle induced by an RF pulse depends on the strength and duration of the pulse. The thing being flipped is the net magnetization vector. At the beginning of a standard spin echo sequence, we apply a 90-degree pulse. This means that after the RF pulse has been applied, the net magnetization vector is perpendicular to its original orientation.
And this would also explain why, like Dr. Lindber listed one of his main symptoms as those horrible vibrations that could be felt in the body. Resonance is vibration, they're synonymous.
This orientation is achieved by eliminating longitudinal magnetization and generating a transverse magnetization vector by synchronizing proton precession. During recovery, longitudinal magnetization increases.
And that would explain why everybody could be stimulated with this just based on having protons in your body. You don't have an option. It's not like you can say, okay, I'm going to bring my protons with me today. No, they're with you every single day. They are the lion's share of your body on a micro scale.
And transverse magnetization decreases. The protons dephase. This looks like a spiraling of the net magnetic vector along the z-axis. This spiraling of the net magnetization vector induces an electrical signal by a process called free induction decay, which is really just a throwback to the high school physics principle of inducing a current by rotating a magnetic field. Search the depths of your mind for the right-hand rule. A few additional terms to note. The recovery of the longitudinal magnetization of a proton occurs exponentially. The point at which 63% of the longitudinal magnetization has been recovered is called the T1 time. The time at which 63% of the transverse magnetization has been lost is called the T2 time. The T1 and T2 time is unique to each tissue type imaged. Think about a class of children running a foot race. Each will recover to their baseline heart rate at a slightly different time depending on their physical fitness. We can take advantage of these unique tissue properties and alter the MRI sequences to highlight them. This is called weighting, and discussion of this is for another time. That was
Okay, so that's what I was just talking about. And it's so different frequencies, different response times for different targeted tissue types. What else? Also, everybody that has an Android or an Apple phone, go and download this app called Snoop Snitch. My phone doesn't have the right chip in it, so I can't use this IMSI catcher, but that's literally Stingray, fake base station, and that's what's happening to my phone to make its connection so shitty. So you see right here, this app that is working, it says that my device is not connected to a network using secure protocols. I'm going to be a victim to Stingray MZ attacks, man-in-the-middle attacks due to this. So this is all done on purpose. This is part of hacking. That's not me changing my settings or having the wrong settings. That's part of this plausible deniability thing, is people ship out these fucking phones and computers and say, oh, okay, it's your responsibility to secure it because we've got a problem with China. The fuck that. No, it's our own government hacking into our shit, as Edward Snowden relayed. It's being done robotically as an advanced persistent threat on the masses. That's the same thing we do when we're at war with a country, is try to hack their shit. So we're having our brains fucked with all the time, our computers and our devices fucked with all the time, unless your mindset is, oh, I have nothing to hide, I'm just going to let them spy on my shit all the time. How is that right? That's like what happens in Mexico, where people are just so used to the corruption that they don't even talk about it, or they know they'll die. Is that what we're trying to mirror? Because it feels like it. Because we had 3 whistleblowers in May of 2023 talking about the corruption of the FBI, talking about if they do the right thing to try to expose how the domestic terrorism watch list is being inflated, people on that list are being attacked with electromagnetic pulses like this. Those 3 men said that if you do anything to try to stop that, then they'll add you to the list. They'll freeze your bank accounts. They'll make it so you can never work again. So that's the corruption of the United States right now. And that's from the mouth of 3 fucking whistleblowers of May of last year. And nothing has changed.